Okay, let's start an anatomy and physiology lesson covering the conscious landscape. And hopefully, by going over this lesson, we can at least chip away at the very real intuition of a concrete self over here being anything more than a thought, a very real thought, but not concrete bedrock in the conscious experience. So let's sit on the couch, put in our earbuds, put down our phone, and let's look out the window at something where our attention naturally lands. As we rest our gaze on the object outside the window, let's establish the subject-object relationship. This should be easy for most. You're over here, the object is over there, right? Separated by what? 10 feet? 100 feet? 10,000 feet? 10 light years distance? Let the thought arise. Just notice the thought of distance. The number. Recognize that thought. As experienced, was the thought separated from the object out the window by a layer of skin, skull, eyes, etc.? Not the concept of what's going on, but what is actually the conscious experience. What was the experienced separation of that thought from that object? Keep the information concerning what was just recognized as salient as possible as we go over a third-person, somewhat in the weeds, overview of what explains what is creating experience right now, what we're observing right now. At the end, we will circle back to the first-person experience, what is actually experienced. Now, my medical subspecialty is not neurology, so there might be some out there that want to tweak some of the information from this lesson, which is totally fine. I encourage anyone to search out this information on their own. I find it fascinating. So, I'm looking at a chimney on a house around 100 yards away from me. Let's start with a straightforward question. Is the chimney that attention has landed on right now in experience the object being observed outside of my head? In some way, is my brain directly observing the object through two orbital foramen in my skull? Is it such a simple explanation of my brain directly observing that object? Let's call it brain-object duality. The answer is no. Let's get in the weeds together for a few minutes. Here's a brief summary of what is taking place, under the hood, so to speak. When an object is observed, the chimney, and actually all the other information in the periphery of the visual field, all of the out-of-focus information, the initial step is that photons, or light, have bounced off of the object. It's the reflected light that actually interacts with our eyes, clearly not the actual object. You can confirm this fact by looking around a room with the lights on and looking around the same room when there is absolute darkness. Same surroundings, but you don't see anything. Why? Because again, no light is present reflecting off the objects when there is absolute darkness. You need reflected light to interact with our eyes. If you're following me, let's move on. Some of the reflected photons, obviously traveling at the speed of light, interact with our eyes, specifically the back of our eyes. But the eyes do something very odd. By the time the incoming information gets to the back of the eyeball, the scene has flipped. Can you believe that? The photon information has gone from initially right side up to upside down at this level of input. Something else interesting happens to this upside down scene in the back of our eyes. It's converted to electrical signals. Oh, and I'm not even going to discuss the refresh rates of images occurring in the back of the eye, as there is a constant barrage of newly reflected photons interacting with the eyes. You can research that further if you want. The converted electrical signals from the upside-down scene are then transmitted through the optic nerve towards the back of our head. Nerves are basically our electrical wiring, but about halfway to the back of our head, each eye's optic nerve splits. Now, if you haven't already zoned out, this will do the trick for you. Think about this. The right half of the scene in front of you is sent to the left side of your brain, and the left side of the scene in front of you ends up in the right side of your brain. Confusing? It gets better. The area of the brain where the electrical signals end up is called the visual cortex. Just to make this even more odd, the visual cortex is located in the far back of our brain. That's where electrical signals are basically unscrambled to create a coherent representation of the visual world around us. So let's start to unpack this. I bring this abbreviated anatomy and physiology lesson up for an important reason. I have heard statements from meditation teachers along the lines of, "There's no separation from you and the world around you," or similar statements. These claims are clearly meant by many to represent some sort of mystical, cosmic reality. Due to their traditions, they invoke metaphysical claims that I think most of us would find baseless. However, based on the information that we've just gone over, is the chimney that my attention is on right now, is the object that your attention is resting on right now, actually over there? Although there is a chimney about 100 yards away from my body right now, is that what I'm actually experiencing right now? Or is the chimney actually part of a recreated simulation of the external world through this process of unscrambled electrical signals? Have any of you used the Apple Vision Pro or other augmented reality goggles? When you put them on and you move your head, observing the room around you, are you looking through typical glasses? Or is the experience of the room actually the finished process of cameras intaking information, transferring electrical signals, and creating a coherent representation of the outside world? Make sense? Let's wrap this up. If this brief lesson does anything for me, it chips away at the intuition that experience is that of over there and over here. It's actually a simulation occurring in the wetware of my brain. That chimney, and this thought, and that sound, and this sensation are all occurring in the same place. Don't hear me wrong. If an object is coming at you, move out of the way. But if you can loosen a concrete stance that there's a self on the edge of this wetware simulation, and rather see experience for what it is, the gathering of so many data points of information, and the recreation of a coherent experience, that might prove helpful in exploring what is actually occurring. Let's wrap this up. As you focus attention on the object in the visual field, think the thought, "I'm right here." Was there anything interesting to recognize? Could you notice the thought kind of diffusely, in some way transparently, overlaying the visual field, not separated by skin, skull, eyes, but both actually occurring in the same space?